Question?
I was wondering what you thought of Santa Claus. If it's a healthy thing for parents to practice, what's the psychological impact of lying to your child? Look. I think lying is the wrong way of thinking about this. Santa Claus is a game. It's a game of pretend. And children play games of pretend all the time. You know, so I don't see any harm in it at all. Now, you know, you don't want to prolong that belief beyond its natural endpoint, but it's a massive game, and it's a lovely game, and I don't believe that there's anything harmful in it in the least. Santa Claus is a game. It's a game of pretend. Santa Claus is a game. It's a game of pretend. Now, what's the psychological impact of lying to your child? We can think about that more generally. Don't lie to your children. Don't lie, period. Lying is a really bad idea. It's a really bad idea. It never works. You might think it works, but that's only because you're blind to the consequences, and probably willfully blind. Plus, it's a terrible weight. You know, if you don't lie, there's a lot fewer things to keep track of. Your life is a lot more pristine and crystalline. And then things that come your way, maybe you deserve in some small measure. And it's a bad idea to lie. But I don't think it's a bad idea to play pretend games with your children. I think that's okay. Santa Claus is a game. It's a game of pretend. Santa Claus is a game. It's a game of pretend. Santa Claus is a game. It's a game of pretend. Santa Claus is a game. It's a game of pretend.
An example of how a very ancient folkway can be incorporated into our culture without us even realizing it is provided by discussing Amanita muscaria. If you go to the Encyclopedia Britannica and you look up Santa Claus, they'll tell you that it has to do with St. Nicholas and it got started in the 11th century. But when you look at the Santa Claus story, it's a perfect mythologium to analyze from this point of view, because look what's going on with Santa Claus. 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 First of all, Santa Claus's colors are red and white. The colors of the Amanita muscaria, for sure. Santa Claus lives at the North Pole. What does this mean? It means that Santa Claus lives at the Axis Mundi, where Yggdrasil, the magic world ash in Welsh mythology, has taken root. Claus flies. This is what shamans do. Santa Claus is the master of the reindeer, the animal most associated with the Amanita muscaria. Santa Claus is aided in his work by troops of elves. Look what's going on with Santa Claus. 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 And what is the work of Santa Claus? To build toys for children. Remember the DMT thing saying, look at this, look at this, look at this. Well, those were off-duty elves, clearly. So here are all the motifs. And I believe that for children in our culture, that all the Christer stuff is not what Christmas is about. Christmas is about standing in front of the tree on Christmas morning with the gifts arrayed and the twinkling lights on. Well, that tree is the tree that the Amanita muscaria forms its symbiotic relationship to. It's always spruce or pine, but it has a mycorrhizal relationship. So the number of motifs relating Santa Claus to a cult of Amanita muscaria, there's almost nothing but relational motifs there. And yet if you suggest this to people, they just back away in horror, you know.
One of the arguments we hear coming from the new type of atheist: when I was a child, I believed in Santa Claus. When I was a child, I believed in the Tooth Fairy. But then one day I grew up and I realized that Santa Claus doesn't exist. I realized that the Tooth Fairy doesn't exist. And in the same manner, one day I grew up and I realized that God doesn't exist. I've always found that line of argumentation rather funny, because to me it seems completely absurd to say Santa Claus doesn't exist, because obviously Santa Claus exists. There are Santa Clauses everywhere at Christmas. There are guys who dress up as Santa Claus. There are Santa Claus decoration, ornaments, we have stories, we have songs, we have all these things which celebrate Santa Claus. It is patently absurd to say that Santa Claus does not exist. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. There are certain things that don't exist. For example, a square circle or dry water. Now, those things are impossible. They do not exist. But Santa Claus definitely exists. The question we need to ask is, in what manner does Santa Claus exist? And I think that asking oneself that question of how it is that Santa Claus exists can maybe help certain people understand the manner in which we say that God exists. There are things that exist that are not at the level of my coffee cup. There are things which exist at different levels of being. Obviously, Santa Claus exists, and you can say that about concepts. Love exists, but you can't. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. You can't put it in a bottle. You can't put it in a box, but it still exists. Obviously, Santa Claus exists in a much more immediate manner than something like love. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. We know what Santa Claus looks like, what his purpose is. Now, the thing is that what people tend to struggle with is to understand that beings are not obvious. It's not that obvious how to contain a being. So you, for example, you have parts. You have hands and fingers, eyes, you have hair, you have all these different parts. And there is something, your being, your personhood, which holds all those things together. Now, Santa Claus is the same thing, but his body is just not as contained as your body. It is actually a lot bigger than your body. Parts of Santa Claus are the images of Santa Claus that we see in movies, that we see in stories, just like your picture, which appears online. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. Your picture that's in your telephone or in some family album, obviously Santa Claus exists, is an extension of you. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. When people see the picture, they recognize you and they come into contact with you. Santa Claus exists. So too, Santa Claus has parts. When a guy dresses up as Santa Claus in your mall, he is manifesting Santa Claus. He is a part of Santa Claus to the extent that he's participating in the being of Santa Claus at that moment. If a child goes to the mall, they sit on Santa Claus's lap, and then they speak to Santa Claus. What would you like for Christmas? The child will answer what they want for Christmas. And Santa Claus will find some story about how, you're going to try to get that child his gift for Christmas. So the child is speaking to Santa Claus. And that's really important to understand. The child is not speaking to Joe under the costume who put on the fake beard. She isn't speaking to him. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. She's speaking to Santa Claus. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. And it also isn't Joe that is answering. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. It's Santa Claus that is answering. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. It is obvious that Santa Claus exists. If Joe starts to tell the child something else, the child will no longer recognize Santa Claus. Joe will cease to be a body part of Santa Claus. Now, you can write a letter to Santa Claus, put it in the mail, send it to Santa Claus, and you know what? Santa Claus is going to answer. And it isn't Martha sitting in the post office, typing out the letter. She's not the one who's actually answering. She is manifesting Santa Claus. The same thing you're doing to Santa Claus, I can do to you. When you answer my question, I can say, well, it's not you that is answering my question, right? It's your mouth that's answering my question. But is that true? Is it your mouth that's answering the question? No. Your mouth is the tool by which you are answering the question. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. The disguised Santa Clauses are the tool by which, obviously, Santa Claus exists. Santa Claus manifests himself in the world. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. Santa Claus is a being that's pretty coherent. Obviously, Santa Claus has a personality. Exists. He has a way of speaking. You can engage with Santa Claus and Santa Claus will answer. This is not just imaginary, because you are not that contained as you think. You as a person, you can be possessed by all these different ideas. You can be influenced by all these external influences. And even in your mind, you are not as centered as you think. You have all these different kind of crazy personalities that can pull you in different directions. So why do you think that you as a person exists? Right? There is something. There is a total way in which those elements are pulled together into a consistent being. If it wasn't so, we'd say you're schizophrenic, or we'd say you're crazy. If you're not crazy, there's something pulling those elements together. So that when I ask you something, answer me, I recognize you in that answer. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. Obviously, Santa Claus exists. Obviously, Santa Claus exists.
Christmas was complicated for me. There's a personal element to it. There's a very vicious streak of familial depression that runs in my family. My father was quite prone to that. So Christmas could be a dark time for us. Christmas could be a dark time for us. Although it was also all of the positive things that were supposed to be at the same time. My father had seasonal affective disorder. Of course, we didn't know what the hell was going on when I was growing up. Nobody knew what that was. And it took a long time to get that sorted out. That time of year has been very complex over the years. So Christmas could be a dark time for us. Christmas could be a dark time for us. So that's the personal end of it. The more metaphysical end is, of course, that I've spent a lot of time over the last 3 decades trying to understand Christianity and what the rituals and routines and stories mean. That's added another dimension to it. I mean, I understand, for example, the mythological idea that at the darkest point of the year, that's when the hero emerges. That's a very old mythological idea. Of course, you don't need a hero unless the darkness is intense. The darkness is intense. The darkness. Of course, you don't need a hero unless the darkness is intense. 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 It makes sense that that's what would call forth a hero. Of course, that's a lot of what's celebrated symbolically at Christmas. The idea of the lights on the trees is the return of illumination, right? Because the sun is starting to come back. All these things are layered on top of one another, and so it's a remarkable. It's one of the things that's really made me so struck as a consequence of studying Christianity, is that so many levels of meaning stack on top of one another in an isomorphic manner and support one another. You know, there's a cosmic story that's associated with Christmas, which is the death and rebirth of the sun. I mean, the actual solar orb. And then there's the more prosaic story of the birth of a baby, which is, of course, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life. Everyone's life. A miraculous event in everyone's life. Birth of a baby, which is, of course, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life. Everyone's life. A miraculous event in everyone's life. Levels of meaning stack on top of one another. The birth of a baby, which is, of course, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life. Everyone's life. A miraculous event in everyone's life. So Christ is the eternal hope of mankind, just like an infant is the eternal hope of mankind. Well, he's born in lowly circumstances and in extreme peril, right? Because all the firstborns are under death sentence, essentially. And there's an archetypal element to that, too, which is really important to understand, which is that even if the hero is divine, he's always born in the extreme danger that characterizes existence itself. So in some sense, that balance between tragedy and catastrophe and tyranny and hope that typifies Christmas in reality for day-to-day people is also built right into the story. I mean, they're in a manger, for God's sake, right? It's a stable. And so it's pretty unstable. And there's the more prosaic story of the birth of a baby, which is, of course, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life. Everyone's life. A miraculous event in everyone's life. Birth of a baby, which is, of course, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life. Everyone's life. A miraculous event in everyone's life. course, there's all these radical political events going on, and well, that's the way of mankind. Radical political and social events going on. And that's the way of mankind. So then there's the more prosaic story of the birth of a baby, which is of course a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life, everyone's life, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Birth of a baby, which is of course a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life, everyone's life, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Levels of meaning stack on top of one another. The birth of a baby, which is of course a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life, everyone's life, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Birth of a baby, which is of course a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life, everyone's life, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Birth of a baby, which is of course a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life, everyone's life, a miraculous event in everyone's life. Levels of meaning, levels of meaning. Birth of a baby, which is of course a miraculous event in everyone's life. Everyone's life, everyone's life, a miraculous event in everyone's life.
If you want to find a true folk religion in our culture, look at the rites of Santa Claus. Santa Claus.
Even before the beginning of Advent, which was supposed to be a 3 to 4 week fasting period in preparation for the feast, the streets are decorated for Christmas, the shops glitter with tinsel and festive display of gifts. Public address systems warble electronic carols so that one is sick to death of Venite Adoremus long before Christmas Day. Trees are already baubled and illumined in most homes. And as the big build-up proceeds, they're surrounded by those shiny packages with shimmering ribbons, which look as if they held gifts for Christmas. Gifts for Christmas. Gifts for Christmas. Gifts for Christmas. By this time, Christmas parties have already been held in schools and offices before closing for the actual holiday, so that by Christmas Eve the celebrations have just about blown their top. But there are still those packages under the tree. There are still those packages under the tree. And stockings by the fires. Gifts for Christmas. Gifts for Christmas. When at last the day comes, the children are frantic. Hardly able to wait for breakfast and not having slept most of the night. They tear those gold and silver parcels to shreds as if they contain nothing less than the elixir of life for the philosopher's stone. For the philosopher's stone. By noon, the living room looks as if a waste paper truck had crashed into a dime store, leaving a wreck of mangled cartons, Excelsior wrapping paper and riding ribbons, neckties, upended dolls, half-assembled model railroads, spacesuits, plastic atom bombs, and scattered chocolate for hundreds of tinker toy pieces, crushed tree ornaments, miniature sports cars, water pistols, bottles of whiskey, balloons. An hour later, the children are blubbering or screaming and have to be shooed out of doors while the mess is shoved together to make room for Christmas dinner.
Why are you crying? I told you I put it in too early.
A little dry. Here's the heart.
Thereafter, the 12 days of Christmas are spent with upset stomachs, colds, and influenza. And on New Year's Eve, the adults get stoned to forget the whole thing. The adults get stoned to forget the whole thing. The adults get stoned to forget the whole thing.
Christianity was like a giant vacuum cleaner in some sense. It certainly integrated itself with and layered itself on top of existing pagan ceremonies, like the tree itself. The tree is a very interesting symbol because the tree is the tree in the Garden of Eden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life. The tree for Christmas is mostly the tree of life. And the tree is also the structure that unites heaven with earth. And the lights on the tree symbolize or represent even illumination and the reemergence of light in the darkness. Light in the darkness. Light in the darkness. A lot of that was extracted in some sense from the pagan symbolism that existed there prior to Christianity. I mean, the tree idea, for example, the idea that there's a tree that unites heaven and hell, which is sort of something akin to Jacob's ladder, is a central tenet of shamanism. And there are all sorts of strange shamanic echoes that permeate Christianity and the Christmas story. Like Santa Claus is a good example. There's very interesting documentation about the relationship between the red and white of Santa Claus, for example, and the use of Amanita muscaria mushrooms among the in the shamanic tradition. So yeah, it's a very, very deep and strange mixture of desert and frigid cold and celebration, and I guess that's also partly what's given it such longevity as a celebration, even though we also seem to be doing everything we can to undermine that as fast as possible. Light in the darkness. Light in the darkness.
This is an excerpt of how the Christmas truce unfolded, according to Henry Williamson, a British Army officer who was there. For weeks we had lived in flooded trenches. The Germans were 80 yards away. Our trench was enflated. We lost many men, shot by snipers. Night after night, since the tailing off of the Battle of Ypres, we had toiled in the parapets, filling sandbag with clayey mud, squelched through muddy lagoons of woodland tracks, carrying rations, duck boards, pumps, and ammunition. We were volunteers, rushed out to help General French's shattered expeditionary force. A few weeks before, we had been schoolboys, bank clerks, undergraduates, medical students. Now our lives were ravaged. Some of us, the young ones who thought of their mothers, were near to despair. life had been interesting, even enjoyable. It was fun cooking our own bacon and making tea in the wood while shrapnel cracked overhead. Good sport stalking the wild geese in the marshes, satisfying to feel the soft hairs of our unshaven chins. The regulars were decent chaps, heroes of Mons. But the rains fell, and the trenches filled almost waist high. After a few days, we could scarcely move our legs, nor did we seem to need food. At night, we dragged ourselves out of the ditches and moved about, uncaring of bullets aimed at random in the dark. All night we worked, carrying parties, pumping fatigues, parapet building. At dawn, we slid into water again and set ourselves to endure the gray daylight. Even now, so long afterwards, when I hear rain on the tiles overhead, the ghost of that time makes me draw the blankets closer around my neck. On Christmas Eve of 1914, we were in the support line about 200 yards inside the plough-steered wood. It was freezing. Our overcoats were as stiff as boards, our boots were too hard to move, but we rejoiced as the mud was hard too. Also, happy thought we would be able to sleep that night. Inside a new blockhouse of oak boughs and sandbags called Piccadilly Hotel. No bed but the cold earth, no blankets even, but sleep. Sleep. Then came a message from brigade headquarters, brought I think by 2nd Lieutenant Bruce Barron's father of the Borrtex. Wiring parties were required in no man's land all night. And there would be a moon. We would have to work only 50 yards from the German machine guns in the White House opposite the eastern edge of the wood. 2 hours later, we filed out of the dark trees into the naked, moonlit terror of no man's land, holding our shovels beside our faces in hope of protection against the expected mortar blast. The moon was high and white among the frozen clouds. We were visible. Someone slipped with a clank of a spade or rifle. We flung ourselves on our faces and waited. But the battlefield was as silent as the moon. For an hour, we worked in silence, in a most mysterious soundlessness. What had happened? We began to talk naturally as we drove in stakes and pulled out concertinas of prepared wire. There was no rifle fire, either up or down the line, from way up north beyond Ypres to south, beyond Armentières and the French army. At midnight, we heard laughing as we worked. We heard singing from the German lines, carols, the tunes of which we knew. I noticed a very bright light on a tall pole raised in their lines. Down opposite the East Lancs Trench, in front of the convent, a Christmas tree. With lighted candles, was set. On their parapet. The unreal moonlight life went on, happily. Cries of "Come on over, Tommy, we won't fire at you," dark figure approached me, hesitatingly. A trap? I walked towards it with a bumping heart. "Merry Christmas, English friend." We shook hands, tremulously. Then I saw that the light on the pole was the morning star, the star in the east. It was Christmas morning. All Christmas Day, gray and khaki figures mingled and talked in no man's land. Picks and spades rang in the hard ground. It was strange to stare at the dead we had only glimpsed at swiftly from the trenches. The shallowest graves were dug, filled, and set with crosses knocked together from lengths of ration box wood, marked with indelible pencil, "For king and country, for Vaterland, und Freiheit." Fatherland and freedom. Freedom? Freedom? How was this? We were fighting for freedom, and our cause was just. We were defending Belgium, civilization. These fellows in gray were good fellows. They were, strangely, just men like ourselves. How can we lose the war, English comrade? Our cause is just. We are ringed with enemies. The war was thrust on us. We are defending our parents, our homes, our German soil. The most shaking, staggering thought. That both sides thought they were fighting for the same cause. The war was a terrible mistake. People at home did not know this. Then the idea came to the young and callow soldier that if only he could tell them at home what was really happening, and if the German soldiers told their people the truth about us, the war would be over. But he hardly dared to think it. Even to himself. The next day was quiet, and the next. Waving hands from the trenches by day, singing and reflected blaze of trench bonfires at night. It was a lovely time. On the third afternoon came a message from the Germans. At midnight, our staff officers visit, and we must fire our automatic pistolen. But we will fire higher. Nevertheless, please keep under cover. At 11 p.m., Berlin midnight, we saw flashes going away into the air. 2 days later, an army order came from GHQ to the effect that men found fraternizing with the enemy would be court-martialed and, if found guilty, would suffer the death penalty. And again in that place, the Veyri lights soared over no man's land at night, and bullets cut showers of splinters from trees, and sometimes human flesh and bone. So hope sank into the mud again, but did not die. gathering anew as each poor human unit fell in machine gun and mortar blast and colossal reverberating rending of the shells of those 4 years. The years whose truth seems to be incommunicable. Sometimes, as one listens to what people say, here in the England a generation died for, it seems like almost pre-war again. Can it be that we lack imagination to see the other fellow as ourselves? Henry Williamson continued to fight. He was eventually wounded by gas. Then when he was declared unfit to serve in the army, he then volunteered for the Air Force to see if that could get him back to the front. But he didn't make it back to the front, luckily, because the war ended. The war ended. But not before 20 million were wounded and 17 million men were killed. Men. Just normal men. Gone. So, this holiday season, please think of those men and women around the world in the trenches now, risking life and limb for what they believe in, for freedom. And think of the civilians trapped in those hellish places, suffering in the merciless path of war. And finally, as Henry Williamson asked, let us not lack the imagination to think of other men as men, men like ourselves, men like us. Merry Christmas to all. And may there be peace on earth.